Jasmine Crockett thought mocking a disabled vet was just a joke, but it blew up big. Her refusal to apologize sent shockwaves through the media, and a quiet strategist named Kash Patel exposed her past mistakes in the most brutal way. What happened next? Her career was on the line, and pride might have been the thing that took her down. Trust me, you won't believe how this story unfolds. Watch till the end to see how it all fell apart. The joke that ruined her career. Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, a smirk on her face, feeling the crowd's energy. It was a fundraiser in Fort Worth, Texas, and she was in full swing, doing what she did best, delivering a fiery, no-holds-barred speech. The topic? Governor Greg Abbott's stance on LGBTQ rights. She was going in. Governor Hot Wheels, she said, emphasizing the Hot Wheels with a sarcastic flair. He wants to roll over everyone's freedom. The crowd let out a nervous laugh, some clapped, but it wasn't the raucous applause she expected. A few awkward chuckles mixed with silence that told a different story. But Crockett, lost in the thrill of the moment, didn't care. She kept pushing, cracking jokes, pointing fingers, sure she was on fire. It wasn't until the clip hit Twitter later that night that she realized something had gone terribly wrong. The reaction was instant, and not in the way she had hoped. What was supposed to be a harmless jab at Abbott turned into an online explosion. The hashtag Hot Wheels spread like wildfire, and suddenly, it wasn't just about her words. It was about the cruelty of mocking a disabled person. Did she really just say that? One tweet read, "How is this even okay?" The backlash was swift and unforgiving, and Crockett was soon caught in a storm she didn't see coming. The next morning, TV stations were replaying the footage on repeat. People were furious. The veterans were enraged. And her colleagues? They were starting to distance themselves. On The View, even Anna Navarro, a Democrat, frowned when they showed the clip. "I don't care who you're talking about," she said, shaking her head. Mocking a disability is never okay. The comment cut deeper than Crockett realized. It wasn't just a Texas issue anymore. It was a national problem. Meanwhile, a man who had lost both legs in Iraq, Bruce Halterman, posted a raw, emotional video in his wheelchair. His words were simple, but powerful. "We can disagree on policy," he said, looking straight into the camera. "But when you go after a person's body, you're not attacking their ideas. You're just being cruel." His video went viral, racking up millions of views in a single day. Bruce wasn't just calling out Crockett's words. He was exposing her lack of empathy, and it hit hard. But Crockett, as stubborn as ever, didn't back down. When a local radio host asked her about the controversy, she responded with defiance. "I'm not making fun of anyone's wheelchair," she said, doubling down. "I'm talking about how he bulldozes every freedom we have left in this state." Then, as if she hadn't just made one of the most insensitive comments in recent history, she added, "Y'all are too sensitive." Those 4 words would be repeated endlessly over the next 72 hours, and each time, the anger seemed to build. But Crockett, unshaken, continued to ride the wave of her own ego, while everyone around her scrambled to pick up the pieces of her wrecked reputation. She remained in her own world, convinced the outrage would blow over. She was wrong. What she didn't know was that in Fairfax, Virginia, a different kind of storm was brewing. Kash Patel, a behind-the-scenes strategist, was watching closely, taking notes, and quietly plotting his next move. This wasn't just a viral moment for him. It was an opportunity. He wasn't screaming on Twitter. He wasn't making flashy comments. No, Patel was a man of patience. And what he saw in Crockett wasn't just a bad comment. It was a pattern of reckless, self-serving behavior. The public's reaction? It was just the beginning. What Patel had in mind? It was going to blow the conversation wide open. Kash Patel's silent strike. As the world exploded over Jasmine Crockett's Hot Wheels comment, Kash Patel sat quietly in a small, dimly lit room in Fairfax, Virginia. While Crockett's Twitter feed raged and the media circus hit full throttle, Patel's approach was different. He didn't need to shout or fire off an angry tweet. He was a strategist, not a reactor. In fact, he wasn't interested in the drama at all. He was interested in the truth. He leaned back in his chair, watching the news cycle. It was chaos, pure chaos. But as Crockett continued to double down, Patel saw the cracks. He had been paying attention long before this moment. The Hot Wheels comment wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest in a string of reckless, inflammatory remarks. And Patel knew it. He grabbed his legal pad and started writing. The wheels were turning, and soon, everything Crockett thought she had buried was about to come to light. While the media pounced on her every word, Patel wasn't moved by the noise. He was building something much bigger, a quiet, surgical takedown that would expose the whole picture. There was no need for flashy graphics or clickbait headlines. Patel was about to deliver something far more damaging: facts, context, and a history of dangerous rhetoric. He spent the next several days gathering everything he could on Crockett: old interviews, speeches, Reddit threads, and even moments from past panel discussions where she had been just as aggressive. One clip in particular stood out: a school board meeting where Crockett had lashed out at a concerned parent, accusing them of being on the payroll of hate. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was part of a pattern, one that Patel was methodically laying out. Patel wasn't in a rush. He knew that this kind of strategic, slow burn was far more effective than shouting matches. While Crockett's campaign office was scrambling to contain the backlash, Patel was working in the background, carefully putting together the pieces. He wasn't just about to destroy her over one comment. He was going to show the public exactly who she was. By the time Friday night rolled around, the pressure on Crockett was mounting. She was scheduled to appear on Tyrell Jennings' late-night talk show. The studio audience was friendly, the atmosphere light. But Jennings wasn't buying into the easy vibe. He had one question on his mind: do you regret calling Governor Abbott Hot Wheels? Jennings asked, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. Crockett's response came without hesitation, a grin on her face. If they knew what he was doing to people in this state, they'd call him worse. The audience went quiet. There was no laughter this time, just a lingering silence. Jennings looked at her, eyebrows raised, but Crockett didn't flinch. She was too far gone, too trapped in her own ego to see the problem. The clip went viral overnight. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even her words. It was her complete lack of empathy, her cold detachment. People weren't just angry about what she said. They were disgusted by how she said it. The silence in the room spoke volumes. As the news outlets continued to replay the footage, Patel sat back in his chair, his work now entering the final stages. He had been quiet, no tweets, no press statements, but in the next few days he was about to change the narrative completely. His plan was set, and it wasn't about drama or shouting matches. It was about presenting the truth, piece by piece, in a way that would make Crockett's defiance impossible to ignore. Kash Patel knew one thing for sure: when you give people the facts, they'll do the rest. Defiant to the end, her last chance. The storm around Jasmine Crockett wasn't just picking up speed, it was a full-blown hurricane now, and she was in the eye of it. The Hot Wheels clip had gone viral, and the backlash was so intense that even her diehard supporters were starting to distance themselves. The media was relentless. Donors were pulling out. Her phone was ringing off the hook with reporters and strategists trying to figure out what she would do next. And yet, Crockett seemed unfazed. Inside her office in Washington, D.C., her team had gone into damage control mode. The usual buzz of confident chatter had turned into hushed conversations, nervous glances, and quiet sighs. Her campaign manager, Lane Corbin, paced back and forth. He had been with Crockett from the start, and he knew this was a make-or-break moment. "We need to get ahead of this," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You need to make a statement, something real, not another tweet. People are losing faith." But Crockett wasn't having it. She sat at her desk, scrolling through her phone, her expression cold. "I'm not groveling to anyone," she said sharply, as if that was the end of the conversation. She glanced up, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "They're just too sensitive. Let them be mad. I don't care." Lane stopped pacing and looked at her, frustration creeping into his voice. "It's not just about the joke anymore, Jasmine. It's about how you're handling this. You got to show some humility. That's what people are looking for." She shot him a look that could freeze water. "I'm not backing down. People know I'm right about Abbott, and that's all that matters." Across the room, Mia Granger, her press liaison, looked pale and exhausted. She had been in this fight from the beginning and could feel the shift in the air. "This one's different, Jasmine," she said quietly. "You can't just tweet your way out of this one. People are talking about your character now, not just your policies." Crockett leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "Character? Since when do I need to worry about character? It's about policy, Mia. Always has been." She shook her head, dismissing the concern. "I'm not apologizing. I'm standing my ground." Mia glanced at Lane, silently pleading for him to intervene. Lane rubbed his temples. "This isn't about what you said anymore. It's about how you look to everyone else. You could have cleared the air in one interview, but now people are seeing you as arrogant, and that's a much bigger problem." Crockett's response was sharp. "So what? I should just give them what they want? That's not how I play the game." Meanwhile, outside of the chaos in Crockett's office, something was brewing. Kash Patel was watching it all unfold with a quiet, calculating patience. He had been tracking Crockett's career for months, and every move she made was part of the plan. He wasn't concerned about the media storm. He was focused on something far more important: the larger pattern of behavior that Crockett had consistently displayed. Patel didn't need to add fuel to the fire with another social media rant. He was working on something bigger, a video, not just about the Hot Wheels comment, but about everything she had said and done in the past. His video was coming soon, and it was going to be surgical. The way he saw it, Crockett's refusal to even soften her stance, let alone apologize, was the key to her unraveling. Every day, she kept her pride intact, the more ammunition he had. Back in the D.C. office, Lane was still trying to salvage what he could of Crockett's public image. He slid a folder across the table to her. "This is the coverage from just the last 36 hours, he said, watching her reaction. Patel's video is already at 4 million views. 4 million? Crockett barely looked at the folder. "He's trying to erase me with facts and fake concern," she muttered, her voice dripping with disdain. "Let him have his moment." Lane sighed. "It's not about him, Jasmine. It's about how you're coming across. People aren't just mad because you said something dumb. They're mad because you don't care that you said it." Crockett didn't respond. She turned her attention back to her phone, seemingly indifferent. Her team was losing faith, but she was locked into her own stubborn pride. For her, the game wasn't about fixing things. It was about winning, no matter the cost. But as the days passed, it became clear to everyone in her inner circle that Crockett had just thrown away her shot at redemption. She could have taken a step back, shown a little vulnerability, and the media storm might have passed. Instead, her refusal to budge had made her seem more like a performer than a politician. Her allies were quietly pulling away, and a few who stayed had begun questioning whether they'd backed the right person. As Patel continued to work in the shadows, Crockett's defiance was growing more destructive by the minute. Kash Patel drops the hammer, the video that broke her. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Kash Patel finally dropped the bomb. He had been watching, waiting, while Crockett's career continued to implode. The news was filled with the fallout from her comments, but Patel wasn't about to join the media circus. Instead, he chose his moment carefully. The video was simple, no flashy intros, no dramatic music. Just Kash Patel sitting in a chair, calm and collected, ready to break down the truth. The title of the video said it all: "Enough is enough." When it dropped at noon, no one knew what hit them. It wasn't loud or sensational. It was methodical, surgical. Patel knew exactly what he was doing. The video began with him speaking directly to the camera. "Let's talk about Representative Jasmine Crockett," he said, his voice steady. "Because this isn't just about one offensive comment. It's about a pattern of reckless behavior, and the American people deserve to see the full picture." He took a breath, then began walking the audience through Crockett's history. The Hot Wheels comment? That was just the tip of the iceberg. Patel calmly listed each of her past incidents, one by one, each more damning than the last. There was the time she mocked Ted Cruz, casually joking about knocking him over the head real hard. There was the bizarre moment when she called for Elon Musk to be taken down. And let's not forget the time she insulted a student at a college panel for asking about budget transparency. Each clip Patel played was followed by a short, cutting commentary. "Does this sound like a public servant?" he asked, pausing as the footage ran? Or does it sound like someone who's more interested in being the center of attention? The response from the public was immediate. By the end of the day, the video had racked up over 400,000 views. By nightfall, it was well over 2 million. People were talking. Whether they loved Patel or hated him, they were watching. And they were listening. What struck them wasn't just what Crockett had said, but how Patel said it. His delivery was sharp but calm, almost like a prosecutor laying out a case. It was devastating, not because of the volume of his words, but because of the way he let Crockett's own behavior speak for itself. Patel didn't need to shout. He didn't need to call her names. He didn't even need to raise his voice. The power was in the facts, and Patel knew that. As the video continued, he took it a step further, addressing one of Crockett's more recent attacks. "You know what courage looks like," Patel said, looking directly into the camera. "You've seen it up close. Mocking a man's wheelchair because you don't like his policies? That's not courage. That's cowardice." That line hit hard. Veteran groups, who had been angered by Crockett's comments, began sharing the video. It wasn't just conservatives who were outraged. Even liberals who had initially dismissed Patel as a fringe character were now taking a closer look. "He's not wrong," one prominent liberal tweeted. Back in Crockett's camp, things were starting to crumble. Her campaign manager, Lane Corbin, was glued to his phone, watching the view count climb higher and higher. Every minute, more people were seeing Patel's video. And it wasn't going away. "This isn't just about one bad comment anymore," Lane said, staring at the screen. "This is about her whole record. People are seeing her for what she is." Crockett, of course, was still refusing to back down. She had seen Patel's video, but instead of acknowledging the impact it was having, she brushed it off. "It's just a smear campaign," she said dismissively, scrolling through Twitter. "People are just mad because I'm speaking the truth." But the truth was becoming harder and harder to ignore. The next morning, a local Texas newspaper ran an editorial titled "The Arrogance of Power." Inside Crockett's own office, the energy had shifted. Staffers were tense, avoiding eye contact with her. Some had even started to question if they had backed the right person in the first place. The walls were closing in, and Crockett didn't seem to notice or care. But Patel's silence spoke volumes. He didn't tweet. He didn't go on the attack. He let his video do all the talking. And as it gained traction, the narrative shifted. No one was just talking about the Hot Wheels comment anymore. They were talking about the bigger picture, about Crockett's whole approach to politics. It wasn't just about policy. It was about a dangerous attitude, a lack of respect for the people she was supposed to serve. The video was simple, but its effect was profound. It was clear now, Kash Patel wasn't just exposing one bad moment. He was exposing a politician who had forgotten what it meant to serve. And the public was noticing. Too proud to back down, her fatal mistake. The pressure inside Jasmine Crockett's campaign office was suffocating. It felt like every corner of the room was closing in on her. Her staff was rattled, their usual confidence replaced with tension and hushed voices. Lane Corbin, her campaign manager, stood by the window, staring out at the city below, deep in thought. He could hear the ticking of the clock, but it felt like time was moving at double speed. The damage had been done, and the walls were starting to crack. Crockett had just watched Kash Patel's video, and the reaction wasn't what anyone had hoped for. The views were climbing fast, and Patel's calm but powerful words were eating away at the public's perception of her. She could feel it in the air. People weren't just mad anymore. They were questioning her character, her leadership, everything she'd worked for. But the worst part? She still didn't get it. "I'm not apologizing to that man," Crockett said, her voice steely as she sat at her desk. She stared at the screen, reading the comments, her expression unwavering. "I don't care what people say. He's just trying to tear me down because he can't handle the truth." Lane turned around, frustration evident on his face. "Jasmine, this isn't about the truth anymore. This is about how you're coming across. People don't just think you're wrong. They think you're mean, arrogant. You're losing people and fast." She rolled her eyes, brushing him off. "If they're too weak to handle it, that's their problem. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to fight for what's right." Her response sent a chill through the room. Lane opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. There was no reasoning with her now. He had tried, time and time again, but her pride had already made up her mind. On the other side of the office, Mia Granger, her press liaison, sat silently at her desk, her face pale from exhaustion. "Jasmine, it's not just about the policy anymore," Mia said quietly, barely making eye contact. "It's about how you treat people. You can't keep doubling down like this. People are tired of the act. They want humility, they want accountability." Crockett snapped her gaze over to Mia, her voice sharp. "I don't need to be humble to anyone. I'm doing what's right." But even as she spoke, the truth was starting to sink in. Her numbers were dropping. Donors were pulling out. Media outlets were picking up on the growing concern among her own party. And worst of all, no one was defending her. Not publicly, not privately. Her pride was now her biggest enemy, and it was costing her everything. In a small diner in Amarillo, a retired teacher named Marla Stone watched Patel's video on her phone. Marla had been a longtime supporter of Crockett, had even donated to her campaign, but after seeing the video, she felt sick to her stomach. She had voted for Crockett because she thought she was sharp, fearless, a leader who would stand up for what was right. But now, after hearing the way she spoke and seeing the way she refused to apologize, Marla wasn't so sure. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. "I thought she was better than this." Back in Washington, the tension was mounting. Every phone call that came into the office was another donation pulled, another supporter lost. The entire team was on edge, but Crockett seemed oblivious to the storm swirling around her. She was still firing off tweets, still attacking Abbott, still mocking her critics as if nothing had changed. But it had changed. The ground was shifting beneath her feet, and she couldn't see it. Lane sat down beside Mia, both of them staring at their phones as the views on Patel's video continued to climb. The silence in the room was deafening. "We need to get ahead of this," Lane finally said, his voice tight. "We can't just pretend it's not happening. She has to address it. And soon." Mia shook her head slowly. "She's not going to. Not unless she realizes she's about to lose everything." And Crockett? She still wasn't backing down. Her pride had taken the wheel, and there was no stopping her now. The next day, a local Texas newspaper ran an editorial titled "The Arrogance of Power." The piece ripped into Crockett, questioning her leadership and her lack of accountability. It was a gut punch, but it wasn't the first of its kind. Democratic strategists were beginning to quietly express concerns to reporters. "We've had doubts for a while," one said off the record, "but now it's becoming impossible to ignore." Crockett refused to pivot, and the damage was done. She had pushed too hard, refused to bend, and now she was paying the price. The public had stopped talking about the Hot Wheels comment. They were talking about her inability to acknowledge when she was wrong, and the deeper, more dangerous issue, her unwillingness to change. Her pride had cost her. The town hall disaster. She just blew her last chance. Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage at Southern Methodist University, her usual confidence radiating as she greeted the crowd. This wasn't just any event. It was part of her statewide listening tour. It was the moment where she could address the growing backlash, clear the air, and maybe, just maybe, pull herself out of the mess she had made. But as soon as she took the microphone, the tension in the room was palpable. The media was all over her, cameras rolling, waiting for the next misstep. The story was no longer just about her policies. It was about her pride, her arrogance, and her refusal to admit when she was wrong. She could feel it in the air. The audience wasn't just looking at her. They were judging her. And this was her moment to change the narrative. The moderator, Renita Bell, a local news anchor, started with the softball questions. But everyone in the room knew what was coming. It wasn't just about policies anymore. The elephant in the room had to be addressed. "So, Congresswoman," Renita began, her tone gentle but firm, "we can't avoid talking about the comments you made about Governor Abbott. The public reaction, the backlash, the Patel video. Do you regret calling him Hot Wheels?" The room fell silent. It was the question everyone had been waiting for. The one question that could salvage her or end her political career. The moment was hanging in the air like a ticking time bomb. Crockett inhaled sharply, her face hardening. She glanced around the room, feeling the weight of the cameras on her. For a split second, it looked like she might actually take a step back. But then, with a defiant tilt of her chin, she spoke. I regret that people are more outraged by my words than the policies that are literally ruining lives in this state, she said, her voice steady, but the edge was unmistakable. A few scattered claps came from the audience, but they quickly faded into awkward silence. That wasn't an apology. That wasn't even a sign of empathy. That was Crockett doubling down, once again turning the focus away from her own behavior and deflecting it back to Abbott's policies. It was a classic move for her, a politician who preferred to fight rather than reflect. Renita didn't let up. So, just to clarify, that's not an apology for the way you spoke about Governor Abbott, or about mocking his disability. I don't apologize for calling out oppression, Crockett shot back, her eyes flashing with pride. If that offends people, maybe they're not offended enough by what's actually happening in this state. My words are nothing compared to the harm that's being done. The response hit like a slap in the face. The audience was stunned. There was no humility, no acknowledgement of the hurt she'd caused. Crockett had just dug in her heels, refusing to take responsibility for her words. The silence in the room grew heavy, uncomfortable. People started looking at each other, shifting in their seats. The clip would go viral within hours. It wasn't just the content of what she said, it was the tone, the cold, detached way she spoke. The complete lack of remorse. The more people watched, the more it became clear. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just standing firm on her policies. She was standing firm on her pride, even if it meant losing everything. Back in her campaign office, her team was in turmoil. Lane Corbin slammed his fist on the desk in frustration. "Are you kidding me?" he yelled, pacing back and forth. "That was your chance. That was your moment to at least show some humility, some understanding of the damage you've caused. But instead, you just pushed everyone away again." Crockett remained calm, almost eerily so. "I'm not backing down," she said, as if she had already won the argument. "I'll say what needs to be said, no matter who it offends." Mia Granger, her press liaison, spoke up, her voice quiet but serious. "This isn't about offending people, Jasmine. It's about not listening when they say you've hurt them. It's about not apologizing for the way you made people feel." She paused. "This is your legacy now. It's not just about policies anymore. It's about how you treat people." But Crockett wouldn't hear it. She was too deep in her own defiance to back down now. She had been elected to fight, to stand her ground, and she wasn't about to let anyone make her apologize. The damage was done, and instead of addressing it, she had just made it worse. The next day, the clip of the town hall hit social media, and it spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Crockett refuses to apologize for Hot Wheels comment." Analysts dissected every word, every pause, and the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. Even her most loyal supporters started to question her. In the days that followed, Crockett's approval ratings took a nosedive. Her refusal to back down had alienated her base, and the backlash wasn't slowing down. The once bold, fiery representative had become a cautionary tale for politicians who refused to listen. But Crockett? She still didn't see it. She was too proud to admit she'd made a mistake. And in the end, that pride would cost her more than she ever imagined. The ex-insider speaks, the truth that shook her to the core. It was Sunday morning when the unexpected happened. For weeks, Jasmine Crockett had been fighting the media storm on her own, brushing off the mounting pressure, ignoring the warnings from her campaign team. But then came the video that no one saw coming, the one that turned everything on its head. Elijah Brennan, a former campaign staffer who had worked with Crockett during her early political career, posted a simple 6-minute video on Facebook. No production value, no flashy editing, just him sitting in his backyard in San Antonio, speaking directly into the camera. It wasn't the kind of video that usually got attention, but this one was different. It was raw, it was honest, and it struck a chord with people who were tired of the political games. "I used to believe in Jasmine," Elijah began, his voice shaky but clear. "I thought she was the kind of person who would speak the truth when everyone else stayed quiet. But somewhere along the line, it stopped being about the truth and started being about her." The video had an honesty that was impossible to ignore. Elijah wasn't just calling her out. He was mourning the loss of the person he had once believed in. As he continued, it became clear he wasn't angry. He wasn't attacking her for personal reasons. He was simply heartbroken by the way she had changed. When she made that joke about Abbott, I winced, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But when she refused to listen to anyone about why it was wrong, when she dismissed the people who were hurt, I knew something had changed. She lost the ability to reflect, to be humble, to grow. And that's not who I thought she was. As the video spread, it wasn't just the typical backlash from conservatives or critics. People who had supported Crockett started to share it. Former donors, even some of her staunchest allies, began to react. The video wasn't filled with rage. It wasn't a firestorm of accusations. It was a quiet truth that hit harder than anything else. I thought she was better than this. One former supporter commented on the video. This is not the woman we believed in. Within hours, Elijah's video had gone viral. Thousands of shares, comments, and reactions poured in. It wasn't just political pundits or media outlets talking about it. It was regular people, the ones Crockett had sworn to represent, finally realizing they had been misled. The truth, as simple as it was, had cut through the noise and reached the heart of the issue. Back in Crockett's campaign office, the mood was tense. Lane Corbin, her campaign manager, watched the view count climb higher and higher, his face pale with disbelief. "This can't be happening," he muttered to himself. This wasn't supposed to be the angle. Mia Granger, her press liaison, was staring at her phone, her fingers frozen on the screen. "This isn't just some tweet storm," she said quietly, her voice thick with exhaustion. "This is personal. Elijah's not wrong, and the people can feel it." Crockett, sitting behind her desk, was unfazed. She scrolled through her Twitter feed, her face hard as stone. "It's just one more person trying to tear me down," she muttered, brushing off the video as if it were some minor annoyance. But deep down, Crockett knew. Elijah's words were cutting through her armor in a way the media hadn't. He wasn't just another critic. He had worked with her. He knew who she used to be, and now he was showing the world how far she had fallen. The real danger was not that her critics were growing louder, but that her supporters were beginning to lose faith. It wasn't the loud voices calling for her resignation. It was the quiet ones, the voters who had once believed in her, the ones who now found themselves questioning everything she stood for. A few hours later, Crockett's campaign team sat in the small conference room, a quiet tension hanging over the group. Lane looked at the group, his face drawn. "We can't ignore this," he said, his voice strained. "Elijah's video isn't just about the joke. It's about something deeper. People are starting to think we've been sold a lie." Crockett remained silent, her arms crossed. "I'm not apologizing. I've said it once, and I'll say it again. I'm doing what I think is right." Mia looked at her, disappointment in her eyes. "And look where it's gotten us," she said softly. "You don't see it, do you? The way people are reacting. It's not just about the joke anymore. It's about how you handled it." But Crockett refused to hear it. "They're just mad because they don't understand what I'm trying to do," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm not backing down." But as the hours passed, it became increasingly clear that Crockett's refusal to listen, to admit even the smallest fault, was only making the situation worse. The video had struck a nerve, and the fallout wasn't slowing down. With every view, every share, the truth was becoming harder and harder for her to ignore. Elijah Brennan had spoken his truth, and now the world was listening. And as much as Crockett wanted to pretend it didn't matter, she couldn't escape the reality. The people had spoken, and it was too late for her to turn back. The final countdown. Is it too late for her? By the time Jasmine Crockett stepped up to the podium at her next public event, the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The crowd was packed, the air thick with anticipation and tension. This wasn't just another rally. This was her last shot. After everything that had happened, the Hot Wheels comment, the backlash, the viral videos, the growing distance from her allies, this was the moment she had to win people back. It wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about proving she wasn't the arrogant, cold figure the public had started to see her as. The lights in the auditorium were harsh, almost blinding. It felt like everyone in the room was staring right through her. She could see a few familiar faces in the crowd, but their expressions were unreadable, distant. Had they already given up on her? Would this be the last time they'd cheer for her? All right, she said, raising her hands in the air, trying to gather some control over the room. She plastered a smile on her face, but felt forced. The energy she once commanded was gone. I know there's been a lot of talk in the news lately. She started, trying to sound casual, like she was in full control. But I'm here today to talk about the real issues. The things that matter. The stuff that's affecting us every day. The crowd nodded, a few murmurs of agreement. She could feel them waiting for her to pivot to talk about the real issues. But they weren't just interested in policies anymore. They want to see her show some humility. They want an apology. But Crockett wasn't ready to give that. Not yet. A few questions were asked, standard stuff about her plans, her next steps. But then came the one she had been dreading. A voice from the back of the room cut through the noise. "Congresswoman, can you please address the comments you made about Governor Abbott?" The voice was calm, but the question was sharp, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. The room grew still. It wasn't just one person asking now. You could feel it, the collective weight of the audience waiting for the answer. She could almost hear the silent countdown ticking down in her head. If she didn't handle this right, it could be over for good. She felt the heat of the spotlight, the pressure building in her chest. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, but now that it was real, the words felt stuck. "I've said it before," she began, trying to sound composed. "I want to apologize for calling out Governor Abbott for what he's done to this state. His policies are harmful. They hurt people. And if that offends you, then maybe you need to be paying attention to the real issues." There was again the same defiance that had gotten her into this mess in the first place. She wasn't just defending her policy anymore. She was doubling down on the attitude that had alienated her supporters. The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. The room stayed silent for a beat, but then a voice came from middle. A woman, maybe in her 60s, stood up slowly. Her expression was stern, disappointed. "If you can't apologize for the way you spoke about the governor, or for the harm you've caused people, then I'm not sure I can trust you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. It was like a slap in the face. The tension in the room shifted. Crockett's stomach twisted. This wasn't some isolated critic. This was a voter, a person who had probably supported her at one point, now questioning her integrity. Crockett's jaw tightened. She was used to these types of questions, but this one felt different. The way the woman spoke, it wasn't just anger. It was disappointment, and that hit harder than any insult. "I'm here to fight for what's right," Crockett said, the words coming out too fast, too defensive. "I'm not going to back down because a few people are upset with me. I stand by my words." But as the words left her mouth, she could see the eyes in the room start to shift. The doubt was there. The anger was there. But so was something else, something deeper. Disillusionment. Backstage, her team was already getting the reports. The coverage from the event wasn't good. Lane Corbin was on the phone, his face grim. "She blew it," he muttered, looking at the feedback flooding in from reporters. That was her chance to show some real leadership, some humility, and she just made it worse. Mia Granger, her press liaison, shook her head. She's too proud to admit she's wrong. She's pushing everyone away, her voters, her allies, even her own staff. "We can't keep cleaning up this mess for her." But Crockett was still convinced that her way was the right way. She'd built her political career on boldness, on not backing down, on fighting the battles no one else would. But now, in the face of mounting pressure, it was clear her stubbornness was more of a liability than a strength. As the event wound down, the whispers started. The next day, stories would hit the press. Crockett refuses to back down, even as support crumbles. The public wasn't just questioning her anymore. They were losing faith in her. And as the silence in the room grew heavier, so did the realization. It might already be too late to save her career. She had one last chance to turn it around. But in that moment, it didn't seem like she had the courage to make the change that was needed. The countdown was almost over. The pride that destroyed her career. Jasmine Crockett's refusal to apologize for her mistakes cost her everything. What could have been a redemption moment became a disaster, as her pride burned bridges and turned supporters into skeptics. Despite a chance to show humility, she doubled down, and in the end, It wasn't her policies that lost her the fight. It was her inability to admit when she was wrong. The silence that followed her last chance spoke volumes. Her career, all but destroyed. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that subscribe button, like this video,